Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and we've got a huge update on the collapsing Biden economy and how patriots cannot just survive, but actually thrive through all of this. All signs are pointing south for a big name American bank, and it doesn't look good. So let me just set the stage here a bit before getting into the details with one of our resident experts. A new report has just shown that from July to August, so in just those 2 months alone, inflation has skyrocketed from 3.2% to 3.7%. That's the second straight bump after 12 consecutive declines in annual inflation. Now, this has left banks scrambling to cut costs. JP Morgan, they've released a statement expecting rates to stay the same over the next week, while others like Morgan Stanley project that the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, will stay above the 5% rate until March of next year. And as we're going to find out, that's bad news for banks that have been investing in bonds because they're simply not paying what banks need to pay off these high interest rates. So, joining me today once again for analysis is our Bidenomics and stock trading expert, Ross Gibbons. And he's got some amazing insights into what to expect from all of this. So, Ross, great to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, it's awesome. And yeah, I heard you had an amazing free training yesterday. You always do.
We did.
Really?
Yeah, it was great. All your viewers came. We had a fantastic time. We're actually doing it again tomorrow because, as usual, with your extremely popular audience, we tend to cap those out at 1,000 people. We did fill up. I know you had a lot of folks who emailed y'all saying they couldn't get in. So we're doing it one more time tomorrow. I know it's short notice, but I wanted to mention that in case anyone who wasn't able to join yesterday can.
What time tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So Saturday, September 30, 11 a.m. Eastern, live, online, completely free, just like the last time.
Awesome. Yes, we always have overflow. We always have more people want to join the training than the webinar software can handle. So thank
Yeah,
you for doing that encore,
sure,
that
of
free training. You've done those a lot, and I appreciate that very much. Okay, so
course.
tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, September 30th, we'll have a link down below for people just to click on to register. All right. So
Perfect.
what do you think here? Is the Fed totally and completely done this year, or will they hike one more time?
I think they're done. Yeah, I mean they kept rates flat at last week's meeting, and they've accomplished what they wanted to do. Inflation is coming down. I know you mentioned it come up recently. They follow something called core inflation, which takes out like gas prices, which are really volatile and move with oil. But inflation, for the most part, has been tamed, especially compared to where we were last year. Growth has slowed. All signs are pointing to meeting that 2% inflation goal by next year.
And it seems, if I understand it right, that one of the biggest factors when it comes to hikes is the unemployment rate. For our listeners, this seems to be a key indicator. It came down again this month. What are your thoughts on how the unemployment report affects the outcome?
Well, you're 100% right on that. The unemployment rate is one of the biggest things the Fed watches to decide whether or not to raise interest rates. Because if you look back over the last 20 years, historically, unemployment is a leading indicator. So when it starts rising, usually at the beginning of a recession, and when it starts lower and the economy is getting better. It did tick down slightly in this last number, but it is still near a 18-month high, about 3.8%. And that's actually what the Fed wants. It's the weirdest thing, but they
Yeah,
want to hurt the economy
right.
just enough, right to the breaking point, to bring inflation down without wrecking the whole
Right.
thing. It's a very delicate balance.
Yeah. Now, and this is where I really want to sort of get into it because there are inflections that incur as recessions begin. And Charles Schwab, I almost always say Klaus Schwab of the WEF,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
Charles Schwab, not the German fellow. They're taking center stage here. From my analysis, things aren't looking good. They're on a bit
No.
of a bad path. If you remember, about 6 months ago, the crisis really began when huge accounts were moving their deposits out of Schwab and putting them in money markets. Now, as I understand, Schwab is closing offices and cutting staff. So, can you walk us through all the factors here pointing to the bad news for Charles Schwab? This is super important because after Silicon Valley collapse, after First Republic Bank collapse, People were drawing comparisons to 2008, right? Particularly
Yeah.
to the Lehman Brothers collapse, which portended the 2008 financial crisis. Can you flesh this out for us?
Well, I'm actually glad you brought this up because, as usual, the media is either too dumb to pick up on what's going on here, or they've got advertisers paying them to keep quiet. But there
Yeah,
are
there you go.
absolutely,
I'm more with that, the latter part.
but seriously, there are big problems with most of our banks right now, and I think Silicon Valley, First Republic, they were likely just the first of many banks that are going to fail. I think we're going to
Mm,
see another banking crisis. I don't think it's going to be as bad as '08. And again, I don't want to scare everyone on this because
right,
you hear banking crisis, you think I got to get my money in mayonnaise
right,
jars and bury it. Your money is safe. Deposits are insured 250,000 per person by the FDIC. So if it's a joint account, it's 500,000. And we learned from that Silicon Valley collapse is even if you have more than 250, the government's going to backstop. They're going to insure that money. They're just going to fire up the printing press like always.
right,
But
right.
it's the investors who own stock in these banks stand to lose everything because some of these bank stocks, mark my word, are going to zero.
So why is that?
Well, the banking business is fairly simple. I mean, I deposit money at the bank, they pay me a tiny little bit of interest, and then they use my money to earn a higher rate. And it's the
Right,
spread between those two numbers, their profit. So, one way they do this, and what most people think of is loans, right? So, Dr. Steve, you take 100 grand, you put it in the bank, they pay you, let's say, 2% interest on the money. Well, they loan that money to me to build a house and charge me 5%. So they're earning five on it. They're only paying you two. The other 3%, that's their profit, right?
right,
That's what most people think of. Another way, and what they do even more than that, is buying bonds. So most checking accounts pay, I mean, nothing, right? 0.05%, something like that. The reason is they didn't used to in the 80s and 90s. The reason is interest rates have been very, very low the last 10 years. So they're only paying you 0.05% on your money because they're only earning 1 or 2% on it buying these treasuries, which is just a fancy word for government
government
bonds.
bonds, right?
Well, here's the problem. Here's how it ties in. I know I've gotten boring here, but and I want to make this as simple as possible because people need to understand this. What banks did is they bought a ton of these bonds that paid 1.5% interest over the last few years because rates have been at zero. So like one
Right,
and a half, at least that's something.
right,
So they take all the money that you and myself and all the other patriots have deposited. They invested in these bonds that pay 1.5%. They've locked that up for 10 years.
yep,
Well, today,
yeah,
that 10-year bond doesn't pay 1.5%. It pays
yeah,
4.5%. So the old ones are worth a lot
yeah,
less money, right? If you've got a piece of paper that says you can make 1.5% a year, I'm like, I don't want that. That's going to pay me 4.5. So
exactly,
you're going to have to sell it to me for a lot cheaper,
right,
right? So the banks who own these, and we're talking tens of billions of dollars worth,
yeah,
that is a very, very
yeah,
big problem. Okay.
yeah,
And so now the bank cannot sell these bonds. The values have plummeted. So, they are stuck making this lousy 1.5% a year on billions in deposits until 2030, 2031.
wow,
So only two ways it can go. If customers are fine earning nothing on their money until then, there's no problem. The bank can
right,
sit, hold these bonds, make the
right,
little 1.5% a year, wait till the term expires, they'll survive. But people are not fine making no money on their returns. We finally have some yield. These poor savers who've made nothing for the last 12 years finally have some yield. So they want something. These money market funds are paying close to 5% a year now. And rightfully so, they want that return.
right,
It's not their fault the bank made a dumb decision.
right,
And so that's at the core. I know I've kind of gone deep with this, but that's really what's happening with Schwab. They've got a bunch of financial advisors. Well, first of all, they have billions and billions of deposits locked in these 1.5% bonds. And their financial advisors, who should work for their clients, as they do, they're actually doing right by their customers, are saying, look, take your money out of the 0% savings, put it in a high yield money market account. So Schwab is again earning 1 or 2% on the money, and now they're paying for 5% a year on it. So they're
yeah. They're
losing a lot
losing
of
money.
money.
Yeah,
That's why they're closing offices, they're cutting costs, trying to stay afloat. It's not the inflation, it's what's happened to interest rates.
right, right. Again, it sounds to me like Silicon Valley Bank, 2.0, basically, right?
Without a doubt.
So how are they excusing this away? How long until you think they fold?
Oh, well, banks never have to excuse it away. They're never to blame, Dr. Steve. You know
That's
that.
that's right.
You take the early 2000s, they got drunk on fees. They're writing risky mortgages, making crazy bets, created a global financial crisis we've never seen before. Wasn't
Yeah,
their fault.
right, right.
Now they've made another bonehead move. And so I just do not think it is going to end well for these banks.
So are we talking JP Morgan? Are we talking Bank of America? I mean, Schwab's a different model of bank with their brokerage, but still
Yeah.
just as influential and important to keep an eye on.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, so Schwab has some profits coming in. They charge fees to manage money and things like that, but they're the big thing. It really is hard to say. Banks, as you and I have talked about before, are notorious for hiding their problems to the
Right.
last possible moment. They're just not very transparent. I mean, I do this for a living. I read, company filings and things like that, and you look at it, you think, well, you have $1 trillion. Where's it at? I don't know. We don't know what the bank owns. We don't know what the rate is on the bonds. We don't know how much they have, when they expire, none of it. So just like we didn't know they were loading up on, collateralized debt obligations and all this crazy stuff in '07. So
Right.
it's really tough to say which ones are in the worst position. Um, I will say if you're closing branches and cutting costs, you've probably got a little bit of a problem on your hand. Um,
That's right.
so I think they're one. The worst case scenario for any of these guys is what happened with Silicon Valley and
Yeah.
First Republic. Uh, it's a run on the bank
Yeah.
is what it was. So people realized what I just told you. They understand. Oh crap, they've locked in that
Yeah.
this and that, um, and so they ran and said, "I'm trying to pull my money out of the bank."
Yeah.
Bank didn't have it.
Right.
Money we invested in these bonds. So if you want all the money, they had to sell the bonds to give their customers their money back. And those bonds are worth 60, 70, 80 cents on the dollar.
Right.
So they took huge losses that they had to fold. And again, I do want to drive this point home. I'm not a fear monger. I don't want to scare your investors. Deposits are secured by the full faith and credit of the US Treasury. And no president, no one who runs for election wants to be the guy who let little Sally Smith lose her life savings and didn't backstop it. Okay. But I wouldn't buy the stock in any of these banks today. Some are fine, probably. Some aren't. Which ones are the good ones? I don't know. I'm not in the business of playing Russian roulette with my life savings, though. So I just avoid the whole gauntlet of them.
Yeah. So where so okay, so then we come to, so what do we do, right?
Mm.
Where do you recommend people go to keep up with what might happen here and make sure they're prepared?
Well, again, it's not something I think a lot of people need to worry themselves with. I mean, if Wells Fargo and B of A or one of these big banks closes down, another one's going to gobble it up. Your money's going to be fine. All I would tell people is don't hold these bank stocks. Don't be buying them. I don't care how cheap they look, especially when there's so many other great opportunities out there. If you really want to protect yourself, no matter what happens, please come to the event tomorrow. It is
Yeah.
totally free. I hold these routinely for Turley Talkers, and you've got the link down below. But we're going to show you a far better approach, and we simply follow these corporate insiders, meaning the CEO and CFO of their company, when they're buying their own stock with their own money in their own account. And these banks know how bad things are. They're not going to do it. You're not going to take. I don't
Yeah.
care how much of a company man you are. Your wife, your husband's not going to let you empty the life savings into your bank stock if you know things are going to get ugly.
Right.
And so we do just the opposite of this. We find ones where they are buying, and they are loading the boat in these little small stocks, and often right before really good news happens. So yeah, come to that tomorrow, Saturday, September 30, 11 a.m. Eastern. Link down below in the description, I believe. I promise it's going to blow your mind. And
Yeah. It always does. It always, I mean, again, it does. It feels, it does. It literally feels like I'm sitting in the same room with Nancy Pelosi getting all this insider trading info.
that's
But,
the goal.
fortunately, we're not being bribed, right? We just want to take care of our kids and the like. But
True.
getting that leg up, that inside baseball knowledge of how stocks work and the like. It's amazing. Again, make sure, yes, we've got the link down below. Click on that link. Saturday, September 30th, 11 a.m. Eastern. You will not be disappointed with Ross's free trainings. They're absolutely amazing. Couldn't recommend it more. Ross, thanks so much. Thanks for enlightening us on what's going on here. Thanks for the analysis that you give. Keep up the amazing work.
Hey, my pleasure. Same to you, Dr. Steve.
We'll see you on the 30th.
All right. See you tomorrow.